Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we will be completing our two-part video review series on the ASR6 Sim Racing Cockpit from the guys at Advanced Sim Racing. In part 1, we went through the complete build process. In this video, we will be attaching some sim racing gear and giving it a proper stress test in driving conditions. Time to put the ASR6 through the SRG's review process and see how it does. So, let's get to it. So we have the Midge motor, where we're going to be using this Midge Direct Force Pro from VRS in their system for testing the cockpit. And this is a very heavy assembly when you put it on. Now you could put the bracket on first if you want, and then come in and try to put your motor on. But if you're by yourself and wrestling with bolts and nuts, especially nylock nuts that won't run all the way up right away, things are kind of flopping around a little bit as you're messing around trying to get the bolts in, and then you got these flanges bumping up against your mount and everything's getting scratched up. So I've found it better to pre-mount the motor on the bench, bring the whole assembly, I'm going to show you some B-roll of that, over, and then wrestle with it there. Now this is a heavy unit. The motor mount itself comes in at over 13 pounds, or like 6 kilos. With this Midge, it's over 36 pounds. So you can see I'm having a bit of a struggle here to get this in. But this is the best way that I've found to do it if you're by yourself, or at least for me anyway. And of course, the best situation would be having a friend nearby that could help you hold this stuff up while you get these T-nuts started. But it's still doable like this, and I can get my knee up underneath it to help support it in places. So it's kind of fiddly, and it's a bit of a struggle, but yeah, got it done, and it's a solid mount. This is just rock solid, as with the rest of the cockpit. I mean, this thing is just not moving at all. Now, I don't have my wheelbase upright mounted or tightened down yet, because I have to loosen this up. You have to loosen these on both sides so you have some slack, so this will spread out and get your brackets in. So I haven't tightened those down there yet, but yeah, you know, this is just a solid steel plate. What is 3/8, 10 millimeters almost. Very substantial. So I don't foresee any kind of flex out of this running this Midge motor, or any other motor for that matter. So there we have it. We have the motor mounted, and yeah, so we'll just get on to the next part. So here are the pedals mounted. These are the All for Sim Mecha 1 pedal set. And I did mock up a few other pedal sets that I had at the SRG for testing. And the ones that did fit were the G29 Logitechs, the Thrustmaster THPA GT set, the one with the fat pedals on it, and the Thrustmaster TLCM, that's that load cell set, and of course the Fanatec V3s. All of those fit in the pre-drill holes in this tray. Now the ones that didn't fit were the SimWorks Pro GT3s, the SRP GT pedals that I'm doing a review on, the Wave Italys, and the base plate with the Mecha Cup. Like I said before, the base plate with these Mecha Cup 1s would not fit without drilling holes. Now, the ones that didn't fit, I could make fit. All right, it's not like you couldn't make them fit. You just have to drill another hole or a couple of more holes for them for those bases to fit on there. So if this was my cockpit I was going to use all the time, then I would go ahead and drill the holes for whatever pedal set that I was going to run. Now, these pedals are like the Hosingvells, or any other pedals that are made like this with these flanges in them, with these slots in them like that. Any pedals like that should fit. And you notice I have them in the 2 front grooves, or slots rather. And that's just because where I wanted my feet to be, and it gives me plenty of room there for my heels to rest on the top of that tray. But yeah, this is going to work fine. The controller box I was able to zip tie onto the connecting plate in the front here. Nice and secure. Not going anywhere. So this is what I'll be testing as far as the pedal setup. And yeah, we'll just get to the next piece we're going to put on here. So now I'm ready to get a seat mounted to this ASR6. And I'm going to use this guy, little NRG Prisma seat. Been using this for a while, and it's a medium size. Pretty good seat, fits a lot of different body types. Now, I've already got my bars down here set to where they need to be. And that's 330 millimeters apart, because the side mount seat brackets that I'm using, these are actually Sparcos. They're rebranded with a JCL sticker on there, but they're really Sparco aluminum side mount seat brackets. And they're a little bit thicker also than a regular steel seat bracket. So you want to make sure that the bolt you're using depends on what kind of side mount bracket you're going to use, or if you're just going to go ahead and put a seat with it's already got sliders on it down here. Now, I've also got my T-nuts in here, and they're spaced out at 360 millimeters apart because that's where the seat's going to be, and that's where the holes on these side brackets are, at least the ones I'm going to use. There's a lot of holes underneath there. And I use this. This is a hex head type of bolt, and it's an M8. It's 15 millimeters long, and it will fit into a regular M8 T-nut that I have in these channels, which fits these channels fine, even though it is a 15 series. Yeah, it works great. So, and the reason I use this is because I don't have a lot of clearance on the back of these seat brackets down here where I have to put my bolt, right? Or down underneath there where the other bolts go. So if you use one of these guys instead of a socket head cap or even a button head type of hex head, then yeah, you can actually get a wrench in there, see how flat the wrench is, and turn the bolts so you don't have the clearance issues with trying to get a wrench in there. So that's why I use these. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get this mounted up and see what it looks like. As you can see, I have the seat firmly mounted to the rig now on the brackets. And you can see the hex bolts I was talking about in there, giving me good clearance when I can just put a wrench on that and don't have to worry about putting a Allen wrench on it. We'll get down here if you guys can kind of darken here, but there's the other two there. Yeah, now that we have the seat mounted, it was very easy to do. It's always pretty easy on these profile cockpits to do this kind of thing. But now that I have it mounted, I was able to go and start dialing in the ergonomics. You can see I already have the steering wheel mounted there, and the pedals are mounted where I need them. And I pretty much got it dialed in where I want it. Maybe I might tweak it a little bit more, but it's real comfortable the way it is now. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and get in there and let you guys take a look what this looks like with me sitting in it. All right, first thing you notice when you plop down in this seat, this is a rock solid cockpit. It's just, nothing's moving. Everything is just very, very solid. And that's the way it should be. And yeah, this is the cockpit that I would have because it's nice and solid. It's just like the cockpit I normally use every day. And yeah, it's just very, very stiff. There's a lot of mass to this with these steel brackets. Just feels great to sit in it. It's like sitting on a boulder or something. Nothing moves. You can't feel anything. Now the seat, remember I have directly bolted this seat to the rails. Now you could put a seat slider in here. I kind of tend to go away from seat sliders because they have some motion in them. If you're really pumping on the brake pedal and it's a stiff brake pedal, you can feel the lash in the teeth in the seat rails. I'd rather have it bolted because it just gives you a nice solid feel. The smaller your back should be right up against the back of the seat to give you support on your lower back when you're using a heavy brake pedal, whether it's left foot braking or right foot and you're doing some heel and toe or something. But yeah, it really feels good when I press down here. I can feel it's supporting all of my back, and it's just the right rake as far as the angle is concerned of the seat. Now, the steering wheel, that's variable. You know, usually it's like 90 to 80%, or 80 degrees to 90 degrees, not percent. And put your, you know, a lot of people like to put their wrist up there and right where the knot of the wrist should be on the top of the wheel, which it is for my seating position when I'm driving it. But again, everybody's a little different. So what's going to be comfortable with you could be something like more like a 90 degree like in here, but I don't like it there because it hits the bump in the seat when you're moving around. So you have a little room to move. It's a little bit easier. But again, it's all up to, you know, individual needs. The center of the wheel is pointing at my neck, and that's typically where I like to have it. So when I turn the wheel, my hand actually gets in my way a little bit when I'm turning the wheel. But that's okay because, you know, that happens in real cars too. So yeah, very ergonomic. I mean, I think I got this pretty much dialed in the way I want it. I can, you know, my knees aren't too high, plenty of clearance when I'm spinning the wheel, no matter what I'm doing. So yeah, it's great to use these profile rigs because, yeah, they're so easy to dial in for stuff like this. And comfort is a main thing when it comes to getting a sim rig. I mean, you're going to spend a lot of hours in this thing if you're like me and a lot of other people. So you want to make sure that you can get comfortable. And so when you get out after a 2-hour stint, that your back, your lower back's not killing you or your knees hurt or something else, or your arms. So yeah, you want to try to avoid that at all possible. But yeah, I'm like what I have now. I think I'm going to go ahead and mount a shifter on here. I'm going to have to drop this bar down though to use the shifter I want, an H pattern. And yeah, I think I'm just going to put a shifter on here. We're using a couple of pieces, but we'll see how that goes once we get to the next segment, and that's what we'll do now. Now it's time to get our ProSim H pattern shifter mounted to this ASR6 rig, and this is where I have to pull out some extra parts. They do have a shifter mount accessory, but it's not going to work for my H pattern shifter. It works for other shifters though. So here's the deal. Now I had to lower the 1.5 inch by, I think that's 1.5 inch by 3 inch. Yeah, I'm trying to always think of it as 4080 because it's 40 series, what I'm usually dealing with. But anyway, we had to lower this a lot to be able to get this shifter at the right height. And it is a tall shifter, so that's just one of the things you have to deal with. I had to get it 150 millimeters. The top of this had to be 150 millimeters from the bottom edge over here, because that's how I had set up on my other rig, right? So the downward support bar, this one here, that was originally on the shifter assembly for this cockpit, was way too long. If I put it up against this, let's see how that looks. Let me pull back a little bit and let you guys see that. And you can see, yeah, there's no way that was going to work because it has to be on the bottom of that profile. So you have two options here. Either you take that long bar outside and cut it on your chop saw or hacksaw, whatever you want to do, or I was lucky enough to have the second piece of the two-piece keyboard tray accessory. And you can still mount that keyboard tray, by the way, directly to one of these wheelbase uprights right in the front there, using that same pivot assembly. You just mount it in the front instead of on the sides like we had it when we were looking at the build video. So it would still work even without that second piece that I now have deployed. Get this out of the way. Down here. And that's short enough so I could go to the second channel in this 1.5 inch by 6 inch main base support channel or profile. And yeah, it worked out fine. So you can see it's nicely secured there, doing what it's supposed to do, and I didn't have to cut this nice pretty white powder coated piece of profile. Nice. So now all we have to do is get the shifter mounted, right? And I took the profiles I use off of my other rig and used it on this one. And it's a very simple thing. And this, another cool thing is, as you can see once again, if you've been following along in this video, that because even though this is a 15 series profile, you can use 40 series profile hardware in here. In fact, these are 240 profiles right here and here. These are 40 series gusseted corner brackets, and we have M8 bolts in here with an M6 hex, and it fits just fine. So I have to have 170 millimeter centers off of these T-nuts, in between these two T-nuts, for this to sit on here correctly. So I'm going to take it and set it up here very gently, like. Hold my camera at the same time. Okay. And you'll notice it has this bar on the top and the bottom of this shifter. And that's for an accessory that we haven't gotten yet from ProSim. That's some kind of a clutch lockout mechanism they were going to come out with. And they have come out with it. I mean, not come out with it, but they've been testing it a lot. They just haven't come out with it commercially yet. But anyway, you can see this bottom piece would hit the seat if I didn't have it far enough back because of the curvature of the seat. You can see it. Now I can actually slide this and it won't hit the seat and get it close to the seat. The closer the better for me. Of course, if it's a little bit out, 10 millimeters one way or the other, really not going to matter at the end of the day. But yeah. So now I just have to be mindful that my T-nuts are lining up, and they are. You can see it, they're lined up there and lined up in that slot. So now it's a matter of coming in and putting in some, and these are M6 T-nuts for 40 series. Putting those in and tighten everything down, and we're back to H pattern shifting heaven. So when we come back, we'll take a look at the final assembly. So now we have our H pattern shifter mounted, and we put those M6 bolts in. Everything's looking good. And really, the only thing you can do once you get everything fastened up and tightened down, make sure everything's secured, obviously, is go over to the rig and test it out. My favorite part of all this work. Okay, so this shifter is not for sim cockpit that is not stiff because it's a big piece. As you can see, it's heavy itself. And if you put something that's flexing, you'll notice it right away. And yeah. Yeah. Making a lot of noise here. That feels good. Nice and solid. Brings a smile to my face. Because I know what we can do now. We can do some heel and toe. So yeah, this is rock solid. The whole rig, again, I keep saying it, but yeah, it's hard to convey that onto video when I'm talking to you guys, but yeah, this is really a rock solid setup. I'm going to enjoy driving this cockpit, I know that. So yeah, and the position, again, feels good where my hand needs to be to do the correct shifting. Don't want it too close because it'll jam you up in the back on the side of your seat here. And so you got to have a little bit of reach to it. Yeah, this is all looking good now. So we've got everything assembled. So all we have to do is get everything pulled over here to this rig, the monitors and everything, and then start doing some driving testing, some real world testing. That's the fun part, right? Give you a quick rundown here on what we're going to be using for our testing configuration. We're going to be using, obviously, this big shifter. This is the ProSim H-pattern shifter, which is a brute. It's heavy and it's big, and you can really pound on it. And if there's any flex in a cockpit, it definitely will rear its head there. And we're going to use it for some heel and toe. And speaking of which, you can see down there we have our pedals that we'll be using. And these are the Mega Cup ones without their base, but we have it mounted to this very massive steel plated base. So I think it's going to do a good job, but we'll see once we're using it. And we're using an NRG Prisma seat here, medium size, and we'll be using a VRS Direct Force Pro wheelbase system. And this has the 20 Newton meter midge motor on it. And also going to be running a steering wheel here. This is the new SimMagic GT4 steering wheel I'm actually doing a review on with the colored buttons and things on it. And I'm running a SimCore dash. This is the UD1-J dash to get my information on. So yeah, everything's looking pretty good here for the setup. I think we got everything we need. So now all we're going to do is get in and do some driving. We're at Sebring and iRacing in the Lotus 79 for some heel and toe drills. Now this is a great way, I think, to test out a cockpit as far as how it feels under real world driving conditions. And yeah, what better way than slamming on an H-pattern shifter like a ProSim unit, which is really a heavy-duty tank, mounted to the shifter and everything else too, the pedal tray and, of course, the motor mount. And we'll talk about the shifter first. If you watch when I'm shifting, through this whole segment, you might see it move a little bit once in a while. And that's when I think when the angle is different, I might be pushing instead of pulling, or something's different. And I think you can see it move because I was watching it and I was looking for it. But when I'm driving like this, sometimes I'm shifting softer than other times. It depends on what I'm doing, and it's variable. So that's why you have to keep an eye on it. But I can tell you this, when using that shifter, and you can see through that downshift sequence, it didn't move at all. And it just feels solid as a rock under hand. The ProSim shifter is a tank anyway. And yeah, I feel like it feels exactly the same way to me as it does when I have it on my P1X, which is a big plus. And I really thought the way when I was building this, that this is the kind of result I would be getting. Now, if you've been watching the pedal tray over there, or pedal deck, whatever you want to call it, you can see also there is no movement. And I wouldn't expect that either. It's a thick steel plate, one-piece unit. And it's like, I think it was like 22 pounds when we did the build video. I think that's what it was. But it's very heavy. And weight and mass, of course, translates to very solid feel underfoot. And that's what we have here in this unit. Yeah, no complaints here on the pedal tray. These Mecha Cup ones feel exactly the same to me as they do mounted to their own pedal plate when I have it mounted over my P1X. So again, you know, it passes with flying colors here. The pedals underfoot just feel exactly the same to me. Never missed a beat when I put them on here and started driving. It just felt like I was, you know, driving normally again on my regular cockpit. Now, the motor mount. I have a midge 20 Newton meter on here. If you guys have seen some of the videos so far, you know that. And I have it turned all the way up. I have the smoothing turned down a bit more than I normally would because I wanted to feel if there was any kind of damping going on from the motor itself through this mount. And I'm happy to say no. And if you can see, it's kind of jumping around a bit. Some people might call it jerky. but it just looks jerky. It doesn't really feel that when you have my hands on it. But yeah, I would run a little bit more smoothing on it. But I did that so I wanted to make sure that there was no tactile feedback or any of these force feedback cues that these kind of motors can deliver being muted out at all. And that's why I'm running it the way I am. So I can feel every little crack, every little crevice. When I jump in the dirt there, cutting the corners, you can feel all that very, very accurately and very vividly. So that's what a motor mount should be doing in a good cockpit, in a nice solid cockpit. You know, once you're in a cockpit that's very solid and stiff and has mass, it's really noticeable when you get into a cockpit that doesn't and things are flexing and, you know, you get some damping going on because of the flex. Yes, it's very, very noticeable to me anyway, because I'm always in something very stiff. So this cockpit is coming together as a complete package here. It's very stiff. You know, it's just a massive cockpit. It feels like you're sitting, you know, on a boulder or something, like I said before, I think a couple of times. It just all comes together to be a very, very stable platform. And yeah, just one of those cockpits that would be at the very top of my short list when I was considering on which cockpit I wanted to get. One of those cockpits that, you know, you buy it once and you never look over your shoulder, no regrets. And that's what these profile cockpits at this level can do for you. And yeah, so having a blast here. I'm not missing anything from being in this cockpit to my other cockpit that I normally use. And yes, so not much else I can say about it. It just gets the job done very well. Final thoughts on the VSR6 cockpit from the guys at Advanced Sim Racing. This is part 2, called The Setup, of a 2-part video review series on this cockpit. In part 1, I went through the complete build process. In this video, we will be attaching racing peripherals to the cockpit and testing them in our driving segment. Attaching hardware to the ASR6 is a pretty straightforward process. The seat rails are mounted in a perpendicular arrangement, and getting my seat bolted to it was quite easy when using my set of side mount seat brackets. The wheelbase mount is a massive piece of steel plate that held a 20 Nm mid-servo motor with no problem. It is a bit of an effort to get it attached to the ASR6 wheel uprights, but this was mainly due from the over 36 pound or 16 kilo combined weight that had to be supported during the install process. Another set of hands would have been very helpful in this situation, but this also makes for a very solid wheelbase and mount result. The pedals I used are the type that have a mounting flange with long slots in each side, a common style these days. This made quick work of getting the pedal set mounted. I did have to use some extra pieces of 40 series profiles and fasteners to get the shifter mounted, but this was because of the shifter that I had chosen to use in the testing, and also highlights the ability of the 15 series style profiles to use 40 series hardware. Once everything was mounted, it was time to stress test the cockpit with some heel and toe H-pattern shifting. This is a very solid cockpit, exhibiting no weak points or flex whatsoever. It truly is a pleasure to drive a cockpit like this. All mounted controls were able to transmit their maximum tactile feedback when using them, unlike when you mount them to a section of cockpit that has some flex in it. The guys at Advanced Sim Racing have done their homework here and have delivered a cockpit that would be on the top of my list when looking for a buy-it-once and never-regret-it platform that is pretty much future-proof for your sim racing duties. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.